Okay, with this video, we're going to look at answering this question. If Warren Buffett has a net worth of around $60 billion and so his net worth of $60 billion, we converted his money to pennies, how many times would they go from the Earth to the moon? So here are how the pennies are lining up like this, going all the way to the moon. Okay, so the research, 238,900 miles from the Earth to the moon. Diameter of a penny is 3/4 of an inch, and then 5,280 feet in a mile, 12 inches in a foot. So step number one, how many pennies does it take to go to the moon once? How many pennies does it take to go to the moon once? So just a little overview, we're going to convert miles to feet. We're going to convert feet to inches, and then we're going to convert inches to pennies. So let's start. So first miles to feet. 1 mile, 5,280 feet. We're scaling that up to 238,900 miles. So the scale factor is 238,900. Multiply 5,280 by 238,900, you get 1,268,392,000 feet. Convert that to inches. So 1 foot is 12 inches. We're scaling from 1 foot up to that last number, 1.2 billion feet. So that means we're going to multiply by about 1.2 billion. So we multiply 12 times 1.2 billion, and you get 15,136,704,000 inches, which is the distance from the Earth to the moon in inches. 15 billion inches from the Earth to the moon. Okay, now how many pennies is that? So we're converting the fact that 1 penny is 3/4 of an inch, and we're scaling 3/4 of an inch up to 15 billion inches. So 3/4 times something equals 15 billion. So in order to figure out what that something is, we divide 15 billion by 3/4, right? So we're doing this division. 15 billion divided by 3/4. I'm using a web calculator to do that. And when you do that, you end up with 20,182,272,000. That's our scale factor. Multiply it by 1, you get 20,182,272,000 pennies going from the Earth to the moon. So this is the number of pennies that will go from the Earth to the moon. So that's step one. That's very important to get to. I'm just going to highlight it. It gets you to here. Step two is we have to figure out how many pennies are in $60 billion. So we're going to use the conversion 100 pennies to $1. We're scaling that up to $60 billion. So we have to multiply 1 times 60 billion, gives you 60 billion. 100 times 60 billion, basically you're just adding on 2 zeros. You get 6 trillion pennies. 6 followed by 12 zeros, right? You're actually adding 2 zeros to what was already 10 zeros, right? So 10 zeros plus another 2 zeros. So he has 6 trillion pennies. And we're going to then figure out, we're going to scale up the number of pennies in one trip to 6 billion pennies. So step two is we know that 1 trip to the moon is 20 billion pennies. 1 trip to the moon is approximately 20,182,272,000 pennies. We're scaling that up to 6 trillion. So in order to figure out the factor, 6 trillion divided by 20 billion, and you can see it's going to be around 300 trips. It's exactly 297.29 trips. So that's the number of trips you can take to the moon. And so it's almost 300 times to the moon, or you can think of it as 150 times there and back. Okay, so just to overview the different steps. Step one, figure out how many pennies to go from the Earth to the moon once. So we know that it's this many miles, we have to convert that many miles to pennies. So we do that, first converting to feet, then we converted feet to inches, then we converted inches to pennies. That's one trip to the moon. Step 2, how many pennies does Warren Buffett has? He's got $60 billion. Convert that to pennies, he's got 6 trillion pennies. Step 3, figure out how many trips that is. So one trip is 20 billion pennies, going to 6 trillion pennies. 6 trillion divided by 20 billion gives us 297 trips. So that's the overview of solving that problem.